Okay, let the record reflect that the defendant is present along with counsel for the defendant, Assistant State Attorney. Both sides ready to proceed. Okay. I believe Mr. Baez was just about beginning his recross. All right, let's return the jury. And have okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Did you heed all of my previous admonitions during your recess? Okay, state recognized presence of jury. Defense? Yes, sir. Okay. The witness may resume the witness stand. You may begin your recross.
May it please the court, Mr. Verdict. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, sir. Good morning. Mr. Bradley, we left off yesterday discussing the internet history that you were researching, and I want to kind of catch up so I could pick up where Mr. Verdict left off. Now, you had testified that you had the headers and footers of the entire history. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And what that means for us non-computer people is that you believe you captured the whole thing.
Yes, correct.
Okay. So the entire history, internet history from March 1st, was it?
I don't recall the start date of the actual history.
Basically the month of March.
I believe I recall mostly March being part of that.
Okay. And you were asked to do this because Orange County had run a net analysis. I don't believe it's outside the scope, Judge.
Overrule at this point.
Orange County had run a net analysis on that. That's a different software, right?
Yes, and my understanding is that it was not able to parse the file.
Okay. And your software that you developed is a competing software to that one, right?
In so far as the history component is, that could be perceived as the case, yes.
And were you given the 8,877 files in individual internet history records from the net analysis?
I'm not aware. This is the first time I'm hearing about quantities relating to history files.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
I was only provided one file, which was the deleted Firefox 2 history.
Okay. And you were only able to find 8,557. Is that correct?
If that's the number you have, I'm not going to disagree with it.
Okay. Do you have your report? I want to make sure we're
I do not have a report here with me.
Okay. If I showed you a copy of your report, would that help you refresh your recollection?
I believe so. Is it authored by me?
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
May.
Sir.
Oh, I see. Thank you.
Does that refresh your recollection? Sir?
Yes.
Now, yesterday when you mentioned the 84 visits to the SciSpot.com, you don't have 84 URLs in your internet history, do you, sir?
That's correct.
So what you only have are the two that was mentioned in your printout.
The two,
SciSpot.com.
I'm confused as to which report you're referring to.
Your the report admitted into evidence.
We were looking at two reports yesterday, so.
If I may approach the witness, Your Honor, I'd like to show him State's Evidence 166.
You may.
I'm showing you, sir, the report for March 21st.
First, and this report was created by someone else on June 3rd. I agree that it is a report by my software, but I did not create that report.
So you didn't perform this report at all?
That's correct.
And you can't make any representations as to the validity of a report that you did not prepare?
That would be correct. I can only speak to so far as what the format appears. I recognize the report format.
And as far as what you saw in this internet history, all that you have testified to, or all that you can testify to, are the actual URL links that you have viewed as a result of the work you did.
That's correct.
Which do not include 84 hits to the SciSpot for chloroform. Which do not include 84 URL visits to the SciSpot.com.
I should explain that a history keeps track of how many times you visit in the form of a counter. You would not expect to find 84 separate instances of a URL or web record. Each record maintains its own counter. Does that answer the question?
But you would see if it was visited on March 2nd, correct?
It only maintains the last visited timestamp. So there could be a number of times a particular website was visited, and it only maintains the last time it was visited and increments the counter for each time it's visited.
And each time the page refreshes,
That is correct.
it would hit again, correct?
Yes, correct.
And you don't know how often this page refreshes itself, do you, sir?
I could speculate.
Now, we don't want you to speculate, sir. You can't testify to that, can you, sir?
That's correct.
And that would, of course, depend on the page itself and what is set up by the website, correct?
That is correct.
Now, Ms. Drain had brought up to you about the pages not being shown to the jury because you had gotten the file much later, correct?
When you refer to files, can you clarify?
The internet history files. You were brought in 9 months later.
Yes, insofar as what they represented, that's correct.
But you're aware that Ms. Anthony voluntarily gave her computer on July 16, 2008, are you not, sir?
Outside the scope of direct and
Sustained.
irrelevant.
Judge, I don't believe it's outside the scope. It was brought up
Sustained.
freely. Now, there are no other internet searches that have anything to do with chloroform in April 2008, May 2008, June 2008, or July
Scope of
2008.
Redirect.
Overruled.
Insofar as the data that I looked at, I don't recall anything outside the month of March.
Okay. So all of those months, there's not a thing having to do with chloroform.
Correct.
And Ms. Drain Burdick had also mentioned that there is nothing preventing, well, let me rephrase that. Ms. Drain had mentioned to you about printing out pages. Do you recall that line of questioning?
I do recall the question.
But you can't speculate as to whether a person printed out any of these pages, correct?
That is correct.
In fact, you have no evidence that any pages were printed out.
That's true.
Unless, of course, the printer leaves an artifact on the computer, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And none of that was recovered. There's no artifacts in the computer having to do with any printing for chloroform, correct?
I can't speak to what was found or not found on the computer. My scope in this matter relates to strictly the data.
Understood. And Orange County, when they consulted with you on this case, never told you that during the multiple searches that they did of that house that they never recovered any pages having anything to do with chloroform, did they, sir?
Outside the scope of direct, irrelevant, based on hearsay information.
It's sustained.
May I respond, Judge? It's not outside the scope.
Sustained as to hearsay.
When you were given the data for this case, did it include any printed out pages having to do with chloroform
No,
from
sir.
the Anthony computer?
No, sir.
And as part of the file that you were given, or that you're aware of, there are no pages of having to do with anything to do with chloroform, are there, sir?
Well, this is a history file, so I wouldn't expect something tangible to relate to data. In this case here, I only had a historical record of what transpired.
I'm referring to any materials given to you by law enforcement.
That's correct. I had no other information but the data file.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir.
Any additional questions, Ms. Burdick? You may.
Mr. Bradley, the data file that you were given encompassed a period of time from March 6th through March 21st, correct?
Yes,
And that's all that you were asked to look at.
that is correct.
Okay. On the issue of the tabs, will the counter only refresh if the tab is active, meaning that it's being viewed or it's open on the computer?
There are a couple of things that impact how a page is refreshed. Number one is there's something within the actual file or the page. There's sometimes code written inside that will say, please refresh me. For the most part, a page is not refreshed unless the user deliberately asks it to be refreshed.
And as far as the time sequences that were just alluded to, if somebody is on the computer and the tab is active, even if another window is open, will the internet history show the next window and then the one tab will remain active?
Yes, that's correct. You can visit a page on the internet on one tab, and if you select a hyperlink or an option on that page, in Firefox 2, it will default to a new tab while keeping the other tab open until such time that it is actually closed.
So any succession on the internet history does not necessarily mean that the first tab was closed and a new tab opened.
That is correct.
Thank you.
As long as it deals with those areas, tabs.
The site that we're talking about is a blog, is it not, sir?
I don't know what site we're talking about.
The one that Ms. Jane Burdick had just mentioned about the size spot. I don't believe so, Judge.
Sustain.
Anyone can write a blog, can't they, sir?
Sustain.
No further questions.
May the witness be excused. Thank you, sir. You may be excused.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay. State may call the next witness. Yes. Yes, you can approach. I don't need the court reporter. State may call their next witness.
Thank you, Judge. The state would recall Lee Anthony.
Raise your right hand and turn on. Solemnly swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you.
I do.
Please raise your right hand.
Lee Anthony, Leeanthony.
You may proceed, Mr. George.
Thank you very much, Your Honor. Good morning.
Good morning.
Mr. Anthony, on July 15th or July 16th of 2008, were you on your family's home computer?
Yes, I was.
What were you doing on the computer?
Doing some internet searching, trying to figure out where Sawgrass Apartments and some other keywords were.
During that time, did you ever delete any of the internet history or the records that were on that computer?
No.
Sir, I want to direct your attention to August of 2008. Was there a time that your sister Casey returned back to the house on Hope Springs Drive?
Yes.
During that time, did you have the opportunity to have private conversations with her?
Yes, I did.
During one of these conversations, did your sister tell you a different version of how Kaylee was taken from her?
Yes, she did.
Can you please tell the jury what she told you during this conversation?
She told me that she met Zanny, who was her nanny, as well as Zanny's sister and her children at J. Blanchard Park, which is here in Orlando. And during that meeting, Zanny held Casey down and told her that she was taking Kaylee from her. And she did that with the help of her sister.
Did your sister describe to you how she was held down?
Yeah, from what I recall, she was held like on her wrists. Like she was held down. They were both supposedly sitting on like a park bench or something like that, and then she was held down.
Did your sister tell you why Kaylee was taken from her?
I believe she did. I don't recall exactly what she told me.
Okay. Do you recall giving a deposition back on July 30th of 2009?
Yes.
Do you remember being asked the circumstances surrounding the taking and being asked that particular question?
Yes.
Do you remember what your response was?
Not exactly, no.
Okay. Can we go to page? For court and counsel, I'm referring to the deposition of July 30th, 2009, page 279, lines 1 through 25.
Lines what?
I'm sorry, lines 1 through 25, Judge.
Okay. You have it, Mr. Baez?
Your Honor, I'm bringing it up on the screen now for the witness and for the... Specifically, I'm going to be referring to lines 17 through 25, and on page 280, which I'll put up in a minute, lines 1 through 4. Mr. Anthony, if you would take a look at lines 17 through 25. And just let me know when you're done.
I'm finished with that part.
Okay. And can we bring that? And again, sir, I'll ask you to read lines 1 through 3. Okay. All right. Mr. Anthony, what was, does that refresh your memory?
Yes.
Okay. What did your sister tell you the reason for Kaylee being taken was?
In Zanny's opinion, Casey was not being a good mother to Kaylee, or wouldn't be a good mother for Kaylee, and she was taking Kaylee from her to teach her a lesson, and also told her not to go to the police or anything like that.
Did she also give you a description, a detailed description of what Zenaida Gonzalez looked like?
Yes, she did. She was kind of normal height, about 5'8", 5'10"-ish. Good complexion, long hair, Spanish. It's about what I recall.
Just to be clear, do you recall being asked that question and giving an answer during that same deposition?
Yes.
Would looking at that answer, the answer that you gave back in July of 2009, refresh your memory?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Can we bring up, for court and counsel, and I'll be bringing up, I'm referring to page 280, lines 15 to 21. Okay. Take a look at that, Mr. Anthony.
Okay.
Okay. I believe you touched on some of those things, but you recall saying giving some other description that, or your sister giving you some other descriptions of what this Zenaida person.
I believe the witnesses said that this has refreshed his recollection or not.
Excuse me. After reading that, Mr. Anthony, has your memory been refreshed as to all of the details that your sister gave you in terms of a description of Zenaida?
All the details that I said there, yes.
Okay. What did she tell you?
What I'd missed there was she was approximately 100 pounds, and that she would keep it darker complexion, like tanning or something like that.
Now, did your sister also tell you what she was doing or what she saw as Kaylee was being taken from her?
I don't recall exactly what I said now.
Do you recall giving another deposition on February 27th of 2009?
Yes.
Do you recall that question being asked of you, your sister's reaction to Kaylee being taken away, and what your response was?
I don't remember what my response was now.
If I showed you that, would that refresh your memory?
Yes, it would.
Okay. For court and counsel, and I'll be putting it up on the screen, I'm referring to the deposition taken on February 27th of 2009. I'm specifically referring to page 101, lines 1 through, page 104, lines 15 through 19. Okay. Have you had a chance to read that, Mr. Anthony?
Yes, I did.
All right. Did that refresh your memory as to what your sister told you about her reaction to her daughter being taken from her?
Her reaction, maybe you'd ask what she had saw.
Okay. What was that?
What she saw?
Her reaction.
Her reaction for that was that she couldn't believe it was happening, and it felt kind of like surreal to her.
Did she indicate that she did anything to stop Zenaida from taking her daughter?
She did not.
Did she tell you why she didn't do anything?
That she was scared and she didn't know what to do.
After Kaylee was taken from her, did your sister indicate to you that this Zenaida person was controlling her movements or telling her what to do?
She did tell me that, yes.
Any more specific than that? In what way?
Specifically through MySpace at the time, that she had Casey's password and would send her, like you can kind of send yourself a message or post something so only you could see it on your account. She would do things like that to kind of instruct her on what to do, where to go, things like that.
And did she indicate that she would go to these places that Zenaida told her to go?
She did.
Did she tell you why she did that?
To hope to see Kaylee, to hope to fulfill whatever obligations were being set upon her.
You had mentioned during your last response about MySpace and also Facebook.
I don't remember Facebook specifically. I know MySpace was just bigger at the time.
Do you know what Timer 55 is?
It was a password that Casey had specifically for MySpace.
Did you ask her what Timer 55 meant?
I did.
Do you recall what her explanation of what Timer 55 meant?
Her first explanation was she did not create the password, but her feeling expressed to me on what it was. Her explanation was that from the date Kaylee was taken from her until Kaylee's birthday on August 9th, that there were 55 calendar days within that period of time, and it was her understanding that, or maybe her hope and belief, that she was going to get her back on that date. But that's all she really had to share with me.
All right, so day 1 would be June 16th, and
Correct.
day 55 would be August 9th.
Correct.
You indicated in your answer that she told you that she did not create this password.
That is what she told me, yes.
Did she tell you who did create this password?
She told me that Zenaida did.
Did she tell you how Zenaida was able to change her old password to her new one?
I would imagine she would have had her old one.
But you don't know how.
I don't know. I don't know the specifics.
Okay. Thank you. I'm sorry, Judge, I have no further questions.
Cross-examination.
Good morning, Mr. Anthony.
Good morning.
So if I understand your testimony correctly, your sister told you another story about the imaginary Zanny the nanny?
Yes, she told me another story about Zanny the nanny, yes.
And she told you that that Zanny the nanny would contact her through MySpace.
Yes, she did.
And that she would tell her what to do, how to control her, so she didn't call the police.
Correct.
And maybe like go places.
Correct.
So maybe she could see Kaylee.
Sure, yes.
And was this like going to phone booths and things like that, or different locations to be able to try and find Zanny the nanny? Or was there any more detail other than that?
I don't believe we got into detail on exactly where she would go, but I would imagine it was like stores and, places like that.
And she would go to these stores and do what?
Outside the scope and cause for speculation.
If Ms. Daphne knows, based upon what his sister said, objection overruled.
Look for Kaylee, walk around.
And none of these MySpace, imaginary MySpace posts to find this imaginary Zanny ever panned out for her, did it?
Goes beyond the witness's knowledge and across for speculation.
Overruled unless that was told to you by Ms. Anthony. You're not to guess about what you think, but only what she told you about that limited subject.
Casey was never successful in finding Kaylee in any of those experiences.
And Zanny the nanny never materialized.
To this day, no.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, witness may be excused. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
State may call in next witness.
Your Honor, I had made an inquiry of counsel, and they're asking me for a.
Pardon?
I had made an inquiry of counsel as to the next event to occur, and they wanted 2 or 3 minutes to discuss it.
Okay. Okay, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we're going to take a 5-minute recess at this time. I'm going to ask you not to discuss this case among yourselves. We'll be in recess for 5 minutes. Okay, both sides ready to proceed? All right, let's return to jury. Okay, state recognized person of jury. Yes, Your Honor. Defense. Okay, members of the jury, my apologies. It was one of those occasions where 5 minutes can sometimes turn into 15, 20 minutes. State may proceed.
The state and the defense have entered into a stipulation as it relates to the next piece of evidence, and at this point, I would seek to introduce state's ON for identification into evidence.
Okay, what says the defense? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I will read you the following stipulation between the state and the defense. On December 11th, 2008, the Orange County utility dispatcher made a recorded call to 911 that was received by the Orange County Sheriff's Office at 9:31.02 hours. The recording is a true and accurate representation of the call. The parties have agreed to this fact, and it should be considered as true in your deliberations. You may proceed. You may publish.
Yes, this is Orange County Utilities Emergency Dispatch. We found a human skull.
Oh my gosh.
I know. We got is it a meter reader?
Yes.
I'm going to let you speak right now with the representative from our field services. This is Benny with Orange County Utilities.
Hey, Benny.
Hi. I'm going to let you speak with Rusty Spare, and everything is recorded. Here he is.
How are you doing?
Hey, Rusty.
One of my meter readers supposedly has found a skull of that he believes is human.
What's the location, please?
It's right off of Suburban and Chickasaw in the Kelly Anthony area, right by the
school. Do you have a specific address for me or not?
No, it's right by the school. If you take it,
he's Suburban and Goldenmouth?
Well, Suburban and Chickasaw.
Chickasaw, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and the school is right there. I can't think of the name of the school. It just go right straight down. It dead ends right into the woods.
Okay.
It'll be on the east side of Chickasaw, Suburban.
East side of Chickasaw. And what is your party's name that we're going to meet with?
His name is Roy, R-O-Y, Kronk, K-R-O-N-K.
He's not touching this, I hope.
No,
K-R-O-N-K. And he's a
meter reader.
Meter reader?
Yeah, and I'll just tell him to stay at that location and just stay away from everything.
Okay. And if you can, try to stress to him to please not draw attention to the area.
Yeah, okay.
And that would be great, just in case it is something. It may be nothing, but just in case.
Yes.
And you're from what department?
Utilities Customer Service.
Utilities.
And if you need any information, my phone number is 407-254-9751.
9751?
Yes.
Okay, Rusty, I'm going to go ahead and send a call up for a deputy to meet with him.
Okay.
And we'll see you there very shortly. What type of vehicle is he going to be in?
Probably a Colorado, small Colorado, white. It'll have Orange County insignia on it.
Okay, white Colorado
Chevy
truck.
Colorado. Yes.
And with Orange County markings.
Yes.
Orange County markings. Okay, we'll see you there very shortly, okay?
All right, thank you.
Bye-bye.
You may continue.
Your Honor, the next witness is Edward Turso.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. Edward Turso. Last name is Turso.
You may proceed.
Thank you. How are you employed, sir?
With the Orange County Sheriff's Office.
In what capacity?
Deputy.
Are you assigned to a patrol division?
Yes, Sector 2.
Were you assigned to the patrol division in Sector 2 back on December 11th, 2008?
I was.
On that date, did you respond to a call that was received by the Orange County Sheriff on Suburban Drive?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you recall, or do the records of the Orange County Sheriff reflect the time of your arrival at that location?
I don't recall the time, but off the top of my head, it was very early in the morning.
You may.
Thank you.
Tell me if you recognize the document that I've just shown you.
Yes, it's my supplement, my report.
That is something authored by you
Yes.
at or near the time of the event that we're discussing.
Yes.
Does
Says,
that refresh your recollection as to the time that you responded to this call on Suburban Drive on December 11th of 2008?
yes, 9:32.
9:32 a.m.?
Yes.
Describe this location, if you would.
It was an intersection. To the right was very wooded area.
Did you meet there with an individual that was identified to you as Roy Kronk?
Yes, I did.
Did Mr. Kronk take you anywhere?
Yes, he took me into the woods.
Okay. How did that happen? Tell the members of the jury what happened once you arrived.
I identified myself with Mr. Crump. I asked him, how could I help him? He had previously called 911. He told me he had to go relieve himself in the woods and found what he believed was a skull.
Did you go into the woods with him then?
Yes, I asked him, show me.
Okay. Did he go in first?
He led me in, yes.
Did you follow?
Yes, I was right behind him, following him all the way to we actually passed the bag and skull.
Okay. Were you able to backtrack and locate the item that he had called about?
Yes, once he We passed it, I would say, 5-10 feet, stopped. He looked around, wondered what had happened. He looks over my shoulder, and there is the site that he was referring to.
Okay. What did you do at that point?
I walked over to it. I stood over the skull, looked at it, and we left the area right away.
Did you touch it in any fashion?
Not at all.
Did Mr. Kronk touch it in your presence?
Not at all.
What action did you take once you left the woods?
Once we left the woods, I had him go back to his car. I called my sergeant. I started Mr. Crump on a statement of written what had happened, and we roped off the area with crime scene tape.
Did you stay there until the arrival of other deputies and supervisors who then took over control of that scene?
Yes, ma'am.
I have no other questions of the witness. Thank you, Your Honor.
Cross-examination.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Did Mr. Kronk advise you that he had called 3 times in August?
No, he did not.
Sustain.
Were you made aware of any prior calls by this individual in August of 2008?
Sustain.
Did you have any conversations with Mr. Kronk about where you advised him that he should not say anything about calling 3 times in August of 2008?
Sustain. Move to another line of questioning called the hearsay answers.
If I can have just a moment, Judge.
Yes, you may.
Sir, how far did you go into the woods?
Ballpark, 20 feet or so.
And that's when you passed where the skull was, correct?
No, I'd say it was about 20 feet. I mean, I'm just going off the top of my head. I didn't measure it out or anything like that.
Okay. 20 feet from the street?
More or less.
Okay. And there's also a weed line, is there not?
What do you mean a weed line?
I knew that was going to be a tough question to answer. What I mean is there's grass that is mowed before you get into the area that's wooded, correct?
I don't think there was. All I remember is a wooded area.
Okay.
I don't remember seeing a mowed section previously.
You just don't recall, or you're certain that there was?
I don't remember if there was a cleared path prior to the woods.
Okay. And when you came back, how far did you pass into the woods before you came back?
When we passed the site,
Yes.
I'd say we passed it by probably about 5 feet or so. When he turned around, he was looking a little bit confused, like where to go. And then he turned and looked at me and pretty much over my shoulder said, "Oh, there it is."
And next to the skull, there was a fallen tree, correct?
There was a lot of vegetation. I couldn't tell you exactly if there was a fallen tree right next to the skull.
And there was also a white bag.
A white bag?
Do you recall seeing a white canvas bag?
No.
Do you recall seeing a bright red bag next to it?
I focused on the skull and the garbage bag that was next to it.
Okay. I can have just one moment.
You may. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Deputy Terso, you directed Mr. Kronk to his car.
Correct.
And then you directed him to write a statement.
Yes.
Did you give him any other directions other than those 2 things?
I don't believe so. I'm not sure what you're asking me. Did I ask him? I told him, here's a statement form. Tell me, write down what you told me, write it down.
But did you give him any other instructions as a police officer as what to do or what not to do?
Nothing's coming to mind right now.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. May the deputy be excused for today, but not excused from his subpoena.
Yes, sir. Subject to recall.
Okay. All right, deputy.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, who's the state's next witness?
Jennifer Welch.
Okay, members of the jury, we're going to take a 10-minute recess to 10:30 at this time. I'm going to ask you not to discuss this case among yourselves. We'll be in recess to 10:30. Okay, members of the audience, the next witness that will testify concerning certain crime scene photographs, which will be displayed. For those of you who may have queasiness or uneasiness about viewing these type of photographs, where you may have facial reactions or cannot control your emotions, I ask you to leave. So I just wanted to give you fair warning that if you cannot control your emotions, this would be a good time to exit until after this witness testifies. So please govern yourselves accordingly. If you can't, the court deputies will be assisting you out of the courtroom if you show any reactions. Okay, we'll be in recess to 10:30. Okay, the pool camera is hereby instructed to blur or pixelate the portion of any photograph that contains skull. And that is also the same instruction for the pool photographer. So if you can blur it out, pixelate it, then that's fine. No one else, including any journalists, will use a cell phone or any other electronic device to try to capture a photograph. The other rules about no one else pulling from the general audience, pulling out cell phones, cameras, or anything, those will be immediately confiscated by the court deputies. All right, let's return to jury. Okay, state recognized presence of jury.
Yes, Your Honor.
Defense.
Yes, sir, we do.
State may call in next witness.
You solemnly swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
My name is Jennifer Welch, last name W-E-L-C-H.
You may proceed.
Thank you. How are you employed, ma'am?
I'm employed with the Orange County Sheriff's Office in the Forensics Unit.
How long have you been with the Orange County Sheriff?
I've been with the Orange County Sheriff's Office for just over 5 years.
What is your assignment within the Forensics Unit?
Within the Forensics Unit, I am a crime scene investigator.
Did you hold that position back on December 11th of 2008?
Yes, I did.
On that date, were you called to a location on Suburban Drive?
Yes, I was.
Do you recall, or do the records of the Orange County Sheriff reflect the address, as specific as it can be, of the location on Suburban to which you responded?
Yes, it was the 8900 block of Suburban Drive.
Do you recall what time you arrived
Yes, on December 11th, I arrived at approximately 11:25 hours.
When you got there, what was the condition of the scene?
When I arrived, it was raining out on scene, and there were several law enforcement personnel present, and it was dense vegetation throughout the area.
You said there were several law enforcement personnel present. Were any of those individuals in the woods?
No, they were not.
Where were they stationed?
They were stationed actually on the street to the north of the actual wooded area.
Do you recall whether or not a crime scene area had been cordoned off or taped off in any fashion at that point?
Yes, I do recall that there was crime scene tape up.
Okay. Did you see any individuals within the boundaries of the crime scene tape when you arrived?
The crime scene tape that I recall was set up further down the street, so yes, they were along the street, but not within the wooded area.
Is part of your job as a crime scene investigator to take initial photographs of the condition of a scene prior to the recovery of any potential item of evidence?
Yes.
In this case, did you take photographs of the scene as you found it upon your arrival on December 11th of 2008?
Yes, I did.
If I may have what has been marked as FF for identification. Ma'am, can you see FF for identification?
Yes, I can.
Is that photograph a true and accurate representation of the condition of a portion of the crime scene?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, at this point, I would seek to introduce FF for identification into evidence.
What says the defense?
No objections.
It will be received in evidence as states numbered.
168.
Permission to publish.
You may publish.
Investigator Welch, can you tell the members of the jury what they are looking at in this photograph?
Yes, this is a section of the wooded area showing the dense vegetation present.
If I may have FG for identification. Do you see FG?
Yes, I do.
Is that a fair and accurate representation of the portion of the woods as you observed them that morning?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, at this point, I would seek to introduce FG for identification.
What says the defense?
No objections, Your Honor.
Will be received in evidence as states numbered.
169.
Permission to publish, Your Honor.
You may publish.
Investigator Welch, what is it that you are preserving through the use of photography with this exhibit?
This photograph shows another section of the wooded area, and in this photograph is also the beginning of a path that led into the wooded area.
Right. The screen that you have available to you is also a telestrator. You can touch it and indicate if you're talking about a particular item within the photograph. You said that there's the beginning of a path.
Yes, there is.
All right. Can you show the members of the jury where that is on the photograph? If I may have FH for identification. Can Can you see FH?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Does that photograph fairly and accurately represent the portion of the exterior of the wooded area that you were trying to capture?
Yes, it does.
Your Honor, at this point, I would seek to introduce FH for identification into evidence.
What says the defense?
Objections.
Be received in evidence as states numbered.
Permission to publish.
You may publish.
Investigator Welch, what is this that we're looking at?
This is another photograph of the wooded area. In this photograph, it also shows the beginning of the path that led down into the wooded area.
Can you show us on this photograph where that is? Would it be fair to say that this series of photographs were taken from a panoramic perspective from your right, then moving to your left?
Yes, this series is.
If I may have FI for identification. Is that photograph a fair and accurate representation of the next section of woods as you found them that morning?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, at this point, I would seek to introduce FI for identification into evidence.
What says the defense?
No objections, Your Honor.
Be received in evidence as states numbered.
Permission to publish.
You may publish.
What is it that we're seeing in this photograph?
This is a photograph of another section of the wooded area.
In relation to the path that you had indicated on the prior exhibit, where is this?
I can't tell in this photograph where it is in relation to the path.
Okay. If I may have FJ for identification. Is that photograph a fair and accurate representation of another portion of the exterior of the woods as you found them on the morning of December 11th?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, at this point, I would seek to introduce FJ for identification into evidence.
What says the defense?
No objections, Your Honor.
Be received in evidence as states numbered.
May we publish?
You may publish.
Ms. Welch, in relation to the path, excuse me, that you had discussed earlier, what is the vantage point of this photograph?
This photograph would show the area to the left if facing the woods or to the east.
Is the beginning of the path shown in this photograph?
No, it's not.
Where would it be in relation to this photo?
It would be out of the picture to the right.
Okay, over here?
Yes, that's correct.
The item at the edge of the photograph on the left side, can you see that?
Yes.
What is that?
It appears to be crime scene tape.
If I may have FK for identification. Do you recognize that item?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize it to be?
This is a photograph showing the wooded area and the actual street.
Is that photograph a fair and accurate representation of the conditions of that area on December 11th of 2008?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, at this point, I would seek to introduce FK for identification into evidence.
No objections, Your Honor.
Be received in evidence as states numbered.
Permission to publish that item.
You may publish.
Investigator Welch, is this the vantage point looking almost directly to the left?
Yes, to the east.
This is the crime scene tape that we saw at the end of the last photograph?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And are these sheriff's office vehicles?
Yes, that's correct.
If I may have FL for identification. Can you see that item?
Yes.
What do you recognize that to be?
I recognize this to be a photograph of the wooded area showing the path that went down into the wooded area.
Is this photograph fair and accurate representation of the conditions of the woods as you found them upon arrival?
Yes, it is.
Or at this point, I would seek to introduce FL for identification into evidence.
No objections.
Be received in evidence as states numbered.
Permission to publish?
You may publish.
Can you use the telestrator to show the members of the jury the pathway that you've designated? What is this item that appears in the pathway? Do you recall?
That item is a sign that is advertising for kindercare daycare.
Can you tell from this photograph, or can you demonstrate on this photograph the path on the ground?
Yes.
All right. May I have FM for identification? Does this photograph fairly and accurately represent a continuation of the pathway?
Yes, it does.
Your Honor, at this point, I would seek to introduce FM for identification into evidence.
No objections.
It will be received in evidence as states numbered.
Permission to publish?
You may publish.
There are a few artifacts on this photograph. What are those?
I believe those to be raindrops.
I may have FN for identification. Investigator Welch, do you see what's displayed in FN?
Yes.
Is it a fair and accurate representation of the condition of the woods as you move further into the path?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, at this point, I would seek to introduce FN for identification into evidence.
No objections.
Be received in evidence as states numbered.
176.
Permission to publish?
You may publish.
Can you indicate on the photograph how the path goes through this wooded area?
Yes.
If I could have FO for identification. Is this a fair and accurate representation of the section of the woods as, again, you move further along the path?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, at this point, I would seek to introduce FO for identification into evidence.
No objections.
Be received in evidence as states numbered.
177.
Permission to publish?
You may publish.
Can you indicate on this photograph how the path makes its way through the woods?
Yes.
What are these items along the red illustration that I've added to the photo?
Those are vine vegetation.
Is this all hanging off of trees?
Yes, it is.
May I have FP for identification? Do you see FP for identification?
Yes, I do.
Is that photograph a fair and accurate representation of the portion of the floor of the woods?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, at this point in time, I would seek to introduce FP for identification into evidence.
No objections.
Be received in evidence as states numbered.
178.
Permission to publish.
You may publish.
Ms. Welch, did the Office of the Medical Examiner, with you present, ultimately recover a skull from this area?
Yes, it did.
Is the skull shown in this photograph?
Yes, it is.
Can you show the members of the jury, if you can circle it, where the skull is? May I have FQ for identification? Is FQ a fair and accurate representation of a close-up of the skull as it was found by you and members of the Office of the Medical Examiner?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, at this point, I would seek to introduce FQ for identification into evidence.
No objections.
Be received in evidence as states numbered.
179.
Permission to publish this item, Your Honor.
You may publish.
Ms. Welch, what portion of the skull is this?
This would be the top, and you can see part of the right side of the skull.
If I may have FR for identification. Is that photograph a fair and accurate representation of the location of the skull, pulled a little further back for orientation purposes?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, at this point, I would seek to introduce FR for identification into evidence.
What says the defense?
No objections.
Be received in evidence as states numbered.
180.
Permission to publish this item?
You may publish.
Ms. Welch, where is the skull found within this photograph? Oh. Let me get rid of that line.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
It's located to the west of the log.
May I have FS for identification? Is that photograph a fair and accurate depiction of the view looking back out towards the road?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, at this point, I would seek to introduce FS for identification into evidence.
What says the defense?
No objections.
Be received in evidence as states numbered.
181.
And permission to publish.
You may publish.
Ms. Welch, Investigator Welch, what is your position when this photograph is taken relative to the skull?
I would be standing near the skull looking west. I don't recall exactly where in this photo.
Okay. And what is this item, just for clarification, in the photograph?
That's a light pole.
Is that light pole on Suburban Drive?
Yes, it is.
May I have FT for identification? Do you see FT?
Yes, I do.
Is this another angle that shows additional evidence items that were ultimately collected by the Orange County Sheriff's Office?
Yes, it is.
Does it fairly and accurately depict the skull with other items associated with it?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this point, I would seek to introduce FT for identification into evidence.
What says the defense?
No objections.
Be received in evidence. It states numbered.
182.
Permission to publish.
You may publish.
Investigator Welch, can you identify in the photograph the other items of evidence and then orient us to the skull as well?
Yes, I can. The skull is located to the west, the northwest area of the log, directly northwest of the skull is a black plastic bag. On top of the black plastic bag, at the northwest corner area, is a off-white canvas bag. To the west of the skull is a plastic Disney bag. And that's all that I'm able to observe in this photo.
Yes, ma'am. If I may have FU for identification. Does this photograph fairly and accurately represent the scene as you found it with other items of evidence that were ultimately collected?
Yes, it does.
Your Honor, at this point, I would seek to introduce FU for identification into evidence.
What says the defense?
No objections, Your Honor.
Be received in evidence. It states numbered.
183.
Permission to publish.
You may publish.
Investigator Welch, can you orient us to the various items in the photograph in relation to where the skull is?
Yes. This would be the log. This is the off-white canvas bag, the black plastic bag, and the black plastic bag and off-white canvas bag would be to the northwest of the skull, which I can't really see in this photo, but it would be in this direction.
May I have FV for identification? Can you see FV?
Yes, I can.
Does FV fairly and accurately depict the condition that you found the skull in on December 11th?
Yes, it does.
Your Honor, at this point in time, I would seek to introduce FV for identification into evidence.
No objections.
It will be received in evidence. It states numbered.
184.
Permission to publish, Your Honor.
You may publish.
Investigator Welch, where are you standing when this photograph is taken?
I'm standing to the northwest of the skull amongst the vegetation that's located along the west side.
Did this vegetation on the west side obscure your view of the skull to a certain degree?
Yes.
Can you show us where the skull is and which portion of the skull we're viewing in this picture?
Yes. This photograph shows the skull and the front of the skull at that location.
May I have FW for identification? Does this photograph fairly and accurately depict another section near where the skull was located?
Yes, it does.
Your Honor, at this point in time, I'd seek to introduce FW for identification into evidence.
No objections.
It will be received in evidence as states numbered.
185.
Permission to publish.
You may publish.
Investigator Welch, you had earlier mentioned a log in your testimony. Is that log shown in FW or 185 in evidence?
Yes, it is.
Okay. If you could just illustrate on there which log you were referring to.
Yes.
And where are the other evidence items that you made reference to as it relates to this log?
They're located on the west side of the log, which would be on this side.
There is an item that is red, right? Not the one that I made, but next to it. What is that?
That is the plastic Disney bag.
And what other, let me clear it. What other evidence items are visible in this photograph?
Visible in this photograph is the black plastic bag and off-white canvas bag.
May I have FX for identification? Does FX represent, fairly and accurately represent a view of the evidence items under the log?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this point in time, I would seek to introduce FX for identification into evidence.
What says the defense?
No objections.
Be received in evidence as.
186.
Permission to publish.
You may publish.
Investigator Welch, can you show us where the log is in this photograph in relation to other items that were ultimately taken as evidence?
Yes. The log is right here. And in relation to the items of evidence, there's a black plastic bag there, the skull, and in this photograph you can see a pair of shorts.
May I have FY for identification? Can you see FY?
Yes, I can.
Does it fairly and accurately depict a different vantage point of those evidence items that you just described?
Yes, it does.
Your Honor, at this point, I would seek to introduce FY for identification into evidence.
No objections.
It will be received in evidence as states numbered.
187.
Permission to publish.
You may publish.
Again, if you could orient us to the various evidence items in this photograph.
Yes. That's the skull. In this photograph, you can see a pair of shorts and the black plastic bag. And barely visible is the red plastic Disney bag.
May I have FZ for identification? Does FZ fairly and accurately represent a close-up image of the skull as you found it?
Yes, it does.
Your Honor, at this point, I would seek to introduce FZ for identification into evidence.
No objections.
It will be received in evidence as states numbered.
188.
Permission to publish.
You may publish.
Can you orient us to the items that are depicted in 188?
Yes, I can. The skull is in that location, and this photograph shows also the black plastic bag.
May I have GA? Do you see GA?
Yes, I do.
Does GA fairly and accurately represent another angle of evidence items ultimately collected in this case?
Yes, it does.
Your Honor, at this point in time, I would seek to introduce GA for identification into evidence.
No objections.
It will be received in evidence. The states numbered.
189.
Permission to publish?
You may publish.
Investigator Welch, can you orient us to evidence items in the photograph?
Yes, I can. Black plastic bag, and in this photograph, you can see a pair of shorts.
May I have GB for identification? Investigator Welch, can you determine if there are evidence items in GB?
Yes, there is.
Does this fairly and accurately depict those items?
Yes, it does.
Your Honor, at this point, I would seek to introduce GB for identification into evidence.
No objections.
Be received in evidence. The states numbered.
190.
Permission to publish?
You may publish.
Investigator, what evidence item appears in this photograph?
In this photograph, you can see a small section of a beer bottle that was found on scene, and barely visible in the top corner is a black plastic bag.
May I have GC for identification? Do you see GC?
Yes, I do.
What is represented in this photograph?
In this photograph is a view of the skull as well as items of evidence.
And does this photograph fairly and accurately depict what you are attempting to capture through photography?
Yes, it does.
Your Honor, at this point, I would seek to introduce GC for identification into evidence.
No objections.
Be received in evidence. The states numbered.
191.
Permission to publish?
You may publish.
Can you orient us to the other items of evidence that you made reference to?
Yes. Barely visible in the photograph is the black plastic bag, and also in this photograph is clothing remnants.
How would you describe that piece of clothing remnant?
It is a collar with a tag still present.
Where would the front portion of the skull be in relation to these items?
The front of the skull would be located right there.
May I have GD for identification? Does this photograph fairly and accurately depict one of the evidence items that you just described?
Yes, it does.
Your Honor, at this point in time, I would seek to introduce GD for identification.
No objections.
Be received in evidence. The states numbered.
Permission to publish?
You may publish.
Which evidence item have you taken a close-up picture of in this case?
This
In
is
this
a
photograph, I'm sorry.
sorry. This is a close-up photograph of the clothing remnants, which I previously described as the collar with remaining tag.
Can you show us where that is?
Yes. The tag by the arrow.
What is this item at the bottom of the photograph?
That would be the front of the skull with duct tape.
May I have GE for identification? Does GE fairly and accurately depict evidence items ultimately collected by the Orange County Sheriff?
Yes, it does.
Your Honor, at this point, I would seek to introduce GE for identification into evidence.
What says the defense?
No objections.
It will be received in evidence as states numbered.
Permission to publish?
You may publish.
Investigator Welch, can you orient us to the various items shown in this photograph?
Yes. This would be the off-white canvas bag. This large black item is the black plastic bag. And in this photograph, you can also see the skull.
Prior to collection, could you tell whether or not any of the items were contained inside each other? For example, was any portion of the black plastic within the white canvas?
Not that I could tell.
If I may have GF for identification. Does that photograph fairly and accurately depict items of evidence and the condition in which they were found?
Yes, it does.
Your Honor, at this point, I would seek to introduce GF for identification into evidence.
No objections.
Be received in evidence as states numbered.
194.
Permission to publish?
You may publish.
What is your vantage point when you took this photograph?
I would have been standing to the east of the black plastic bag, which would have been northeast of the skull.
Does this photograph show vegetation that obscured these evidence items from the vantage point you just described?
Yes, it does.
And which items are shown in the photo?
In this photo is the off-white canvas bag and the black plastic bag.
Is the skull in the photo at all?
I can't tell from this photo.
Can I direct your attention to an item in the corner? Can you see that?
Yes,
What is that?
that appears to be duct tape.
Was that duct tape free on the scene, or was it the duct tape that you had earlier described as being with the skull?
It was the duct tape that I had earlier described as being on the skull.
May I have GG for identification? Does this photograph fairly and accurately represent the evidence items that were ultimately collected from a different vantage point?
Yes, it does.
Your Honor, at this point, I would seek to introduce GG for identification into evidence.
What says the defense?
No objections.
Be received in evidence as states numbered.
195.
Permission to publish this item?
You may publish.
Investigator Welch, can you tell us what your vantage point is when taking this photograph?
Yes, I would have been standing partially over the log to the southeast of the skull.
Okay. Is the log shown in the photograph anywhere?
Barely, along the bottom.
Did you have to lean over the log to take this photo?
Yes.
Can you show us what items of evidence are within the photograph?
Yes. The black plastic bag, barely visible, is the off-white canvas bag. The red plastic Disney bag, and that would be the skull.
May I have GH for identification? Investigator Welch, do you see GH?
Yes, I do.
Does GH fairly and accurately represent a close-up of items of evidence that you've described?
Yes, it does.
Your Honor, at this point, I would seek to introduce GH for identification into evidence.
No objections.
We received an evidence that states numbered.
Permission to publish?
You may publish.
Investigator Welch, what are we looking at in 196 in evidence?
This is a close-up photograph of duct tape that was on the front of the skull, and in the photograph you can also see the clothing remnants.
Is that this item?
Yes, that's the clothing remnants.
With the tag in this direction?
Yes, that's correct.
May I have GI for identification? Is this another angle of the same evidence item?
Yes, it is.
Is there another item that can be seen in the photograph as I've marked with red line?
Yes.
Is this photograph fairly and accurately depict the condition of the items as you found them?
Yes, it does.
Your Honor, at this point, I would seek to introduce GI for identification into evidence.
No objections.
We received an evidence that states numbered.
197.
May I publish?
You may publish.
Investigator Welch, I had made a mark with a red line before the item was published. What is it that is shown in that photograph?
On scene, it appeared to be a white towel, but I was later advised that it was a blanket.
May I have GJ for identification? Do you see GJ?
Yes, I do.
Does that fairly and accurately depict another vantage point?
Yes, it does.
Your Honor, at this point, I would seek to introduce GJ for identification into evidence.
What says the defense?
No objections.
We received an evidence as states numbered.
198.
Permission to publish?
You may publish.
Investigator Welch, what are we looking at in this photograph?
This is a view standing near the black plastic bag and off-white canvas bag, showing a view towards Suburban Drive.
Does this fairly and accurately represent the scene as you found it that morning?
Yes, it does.
Your Honor, at this point, I would seek to introduce GJ for identification into evidence. Oh,
No.
I already did that. Sorry. All right. what is the evidence item that you made reference to?
In this photograph, you can see the white canvas bag.
Let me then move to GK for identification. Do you recognize the photograph?
Yes, I do.
Does it fairly and accurately depict the condition of the scene as the medical examiner arrived and began to remove the remains?
Yes, it does.
Your Honor, at this point, I would seek to introduce GK for identification into evidence.
No objections.
Be received as states numbered.
And permission to publish this item.
You may publish.
Can you orient us to the items in the photograph and tell us what is happening at this juncture?
Yes. In this photograph, the black plastic bag, the red plastic Disney bag. In this photograph is the skull with duct tape present. And in this photograph, the Chief Medical Legal Investigator, Stephen Hansen, is picking up the skull to remove it from the scene.
Thank you, Ms. Welch. Your Honor, at this point, I have no other questions of the witness on these particular issues.
Cross-examination.
Please report. Investigator Welsh, good morning.
Good morning.
I wanted to talk to you about your position.
Okay.
As a crime scene investigator, one of the first and most important things that you do is try to document the scene.
Yes, that's correct.
And your job is incredibly important because you want to try and show as best you possibly can the jurors what that scene looked like when you first arrived.
Yes, that is correct.
And you are trained extensively on how to do this.
Yes, that would be correct.
And part of that reason, well, the main reason for that is that you never get a second chance at an actual crime scene.
Yes, it is rare.
And the importance of having a scene preserved is because once people come in, it would get contaminated.
Yes.
And the more people that come in and observe the scene, the more contamination it has, correct?
Yes, that's true.
And if there is a body or remains that have been tampered with, that would affect everyone's ability to do their job, correct?
Yes.
It would affect investigators to be able to determine what happened at that location.
Yes.
It could affect as well the medical examiner in determining what may or may not have happened. To a limited extent, right?
It could.
Yes. And some of the things you also look for is to see if a scene is staged, do you not?
Yes.
And it is very common when you have scenes to be careful and to observe and look for these things of what may be a staged scene, correct?
Yes.
And that's because sometimes there are people who try to conceal certain items of evidence. You may answer.
I'm sorry, can you repeat?
Sure. And that's because sometimes people try to conceal certain items of evidence.
They may.
And then there are those stage scenes where people try to make the scene look like something else happened there.
Yes, they could.
And that is why it is paramount, to the utmost important, that the scene be preserved and that the scene not be tampered with in any way.
Yes, that would be correct.
May I publish state's evidence GE?
What's the evidence number?
93? 193.
You may.
I don't know. Can you all see that? Okay. Now I'd like to draw your attention to...
The witness can't see.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No.
That wouldn't be fair. Investigator Welch, can you see it now, ma'am?
Yes, I can.
Okay. I'd like to draw your attention to the duct tape area. Can you draw a circle around the duct tape? Now, is it fair to say, Investigator Welch, that the duct tape is somewhat in the air on this photograph?
It appears it could be.
Okay. And you can see almost the entire width of the duct tape, can you not?
Yes, it appears you can.
And it is, would this area be classified as the front of the skull?
Yes.
And the end portion of the duct tape would be right there, would it not?
Yes. If that is the duct tape, yes.
So as you see it now, it is flat on the ground, pointed at, I guess what could best be described as 1 o'clock, correct? In that direction?
I can't tell if it's flat on the ground, but it does appear to be pointed in that direction.
Can I see GF? Okay. May I publish state's evidence 194?
You may.
Can you see that photograph, Investigator Welsh?
Yes, I can.
Can the jury see it as well? Now, here you do not see, I'm going to draw a circle around the duct tape if that's okay. Can you see that there?
Yes.
Okay. Here you see the duct tape but not the skull, correct?
It appears to be the duct tape, yes.
And it is also lying, or appears to be lying, flat on the surface.
I can't tell if it's laying flat.
You can almost see the entire width of it, correct?
Yes.
And there appears to be an end piece right about there.
If that is the duct tape, yes.
Okay. And then the other end piece would be down here. I may have drawn over it. Let me clear that. Down there?
Yes, it appears to be.
Can I have G? May I publish, Your Honor, State 196?
You may.
Can you see that, Investigator Welsh?
Yes, I can.
Can the ladies and gentlemen of the jury see it? Now, this is a close-up of the duct tape, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, here you can see pretty much the entire width of the tape. Can you not? Right there, through there.
Yes.
And here, you actually see the end of the duct tape, do you not?
Yes, it appears to be the end.
Where it would be the cutted edge or something to that effect?
I can't tell if it's cut, but it appears to be an end.
You can see that it's an uneven edge. Can you not?
Yes, I can.
And that would appear to be the end of that piece of duct tape, correct?
It does appear to be.
Can I have GI? Your Honor, may I publish State's Evidence 197?
You may.
Investigator Welsh, can you see that photograph?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Now, what we're looking at, again, is almost the width of the entire duct tape from here to there.
Yes.
And this area here appears to be the edge of the duct tape or the ending.
It appears to be a section of the ending.
Can I have the last? May I show, Your Honor, the jury, State's Evidence 199?
You may.
Investigator Welsh, can you see that?
Yes, I can.
Now, this is Investigator Hansen, correct?
Yes.
And he is currently collecting the skull at this time.
Yes.
And he is also at the same time collecting the duct tape, is he not?
Yes.
And in order to collect all of them, do you notice that he has to apply some force to lift all of those items together?
He would have to apply force to lift it, just like you would have to lift anything.
And he's also including extra, I guess, foliage, where I've just drawn. Can you see that?
It does appear that he is also grabbing vegetation.
That's a better word. And also, he is also applying pressure in this area, is he not, as he's collecting it?
I can't tell.
He would have to in order to lift it.
In order to lift the skull.
And he's not wearing any protective footwear, is he?
Not other than boots.
And the person next to him is also not wearing any protective footing, are they?
No.
And it appears his other leg is also stepping on other items of evidence that would be collected. Is that correct?
They could be.
I can have just one moment.
You may.
Thank you, Investigator Welsh. I have no further questions at this time for this topic.
Redirect? No redirect. Okay, Investigator Welch, you may be excused.
Thank you.
Subject to recall.
Thank you.
Attorney's approach, I don't need the court report. State may call the next witness.
Steve Hansen.
You solemnly swear or affirm to tell the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I did.
My name is Stephen Hansen, Hanson, and I'm the Chief Investigator for the District 9 Medical Examiner's Office.
Mr. Hansen, how long have you worked for the medical examiner's office?
Here, almost 7 years.
Right. And who is the medical examiner for the District 9?
The Chief Medical Examiner is Dr. Jan Garavaglia.
Prior to working with the medical examiner in District 9, where have you worked before that?
For about 18 months prior to coming here, I was a crime scene manager for the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office. For 11 years prior to that, I was the chief investigator for the Bexar County Medical Examiner's Office in San Antonio, Texas.
Now, what are the responsibilities that you have in your present position?
As the chief investigator, I supervise and do the scheduling for all of the investigators assigned, but I also go ahead and work cases myself.
Is one of your responsibilities the collection of human remains for later examination by the forensic pathologists that work for the District 9 Medical Examiner's Office?
Yes, it is.
On or about, or on the 11th day of December of 2008, did you receive notification of the location of what were believed to be human remains in an area in Orange County, Florida?
Yes, I did.
Approximately what time did you receive that
It
notification?
was around 11 o'clock in the morning.
And, pardon me, did you then travel to a location in one of your medical examiner's vehicles?
I traveled to Suburban Drive in Orlando.
And when you arrived there, did you take photographs of the scene in general and various items of evidence that were collected?
As part of my entire investigation of the area, yes, I did.
Let me, if I may have the witness shown, State's Exhibit for Identification BV. Do you recognize State's Exhibit BV?
Yes, I do.
And what does it show?
This is, it looks like it's the south side of Suburban Drive in Orlando.
Would this have been a photograph you took when you first arrived before actually entering
Yes, it is.
the scene? Does it fairly and accurately depict the scene as it was when you arrived?
Indeed.
When you arrived, was it raining?
Yes, it was.
At this time, you ought to move to evidence, State's Exhibit B for identification.
What says the defense?
No objection, Your Honor.
You received an evidence that states number.
And may I publish?
You may publish.
I just describe sort of what we're looking at as we look at this photograph.
When I do a scene investigation, I take photographs of the area surrounding the scene specifically, and this is the road, Suburban Drive, and specifically a portion of the area that was in question. further inside the woods is where the actual scene was at the time.
All right. If I could have states BW. Do you recognize this photograph?
Yes, I do.
This is a photograph that you took on the date we've been discussing.
Indeed.
Does it fairly and accurately depict the scene as you saw it?
Yes, it does.
This time, state would move to evidence, State's Exhibit BW.
Well, no objection, Your Honor.
Be received in evidence. The state's numbered.
May I publish?
You may publish.
All right. Tell us what we're looking at in this photograph.
This is the south side of Suburban Drive, and as you can see up towards the center top, it looks like there's a little bit of an opening in the growth, and that would be kind of the path that led into where the remains were found.
The monitor you have in front of you is a telestrator. If you'll touch the screen, you can make a line or circle,
okay.
kind of circle the entrance.
Okay.
As you
This is kind of the...
that area right there. Thank you. May have State's Exhibit BX. Do you recognize this photograph?
Yes, I do.
And does it fairly and accurately depict the scene as you found it,
Yes.
as moving further into the
Yes,
woods?
it does.
This time you're going to move into evidence, State's Exhibit BX.
Be received in evidence. The state's numbered.
May I publish?
You may publish.
All right. Take us through again what this is showing us about your path as it continued
Again,
into the woods.
During the course of a scene investigation, you take various photographs and you go from a larger area into a smaller area, and this is a photograph in that series moving into the area where the remains were found.
There's an item that appears in the photograph here. Was that a advertising sign for something?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, sir.
Was that an advertising sign for something?
There was an advertising sign that was there. I'm not exactly sure if that was it. It's a little far off. It could well have been.
All right. If I could have the next photograph be Y. And again, is this another photograph a little bit farther down the path?
Yes, it is. And in this one, you can see, I think, the item that you were referring to over here, and that was some sort of plastic advertisement that has the little metal stands on it that you stick into the ground.
And does this fairly accurately depict the scene?
Yes, it does.
State will move to evidence, State's Exhibit BY.
No objection.
Be received in evidence. The state's numbered.
Request to publish?
Publish.
All right, so just you've circled an item. That's the little sign going in. Kind of give us a line as to how you would have to continue on this path to get to the area of concern.
Oh, not very good at that. Kind of like that.
Slightly curving to the right.
Exactly.
Could I have State's Exhibit BZ? You recognize that? Is it a fair and accurate photograph of the continuation of the path?
Yes, I do.
State will move to evidence, State's Exhibit BZ.
No objection, Your Honor.
Be received in evidence. The state's numbered.
May I publish?
You may publish.
All right. Again, if you just show us sort of where is the continued path to the area that we're most interested in. Very good. Could I have State's Exhibit CA, please? You recognize State's Exhibit CA?
Yes, it's further into the area in question.
And again, does this fairly and accurately depict the scene as you found it?
It is.
State, this time, Your Honor, State would move to evidence, State's Exhibit CA.
No objection, Your Honor.
Be received in evidence. The state's numbered.
May I publish?
You may publish.
Now, in this photograph, do we see the first hint of the area that we're going to be talking about?
Yes, we do.
Could you just circle it so we get that perspective from this photograph? And would that item be a fallen log?
Yes, it is.
And the area of concern is just after that?
That's correct.
Could I have State's Exhibit CB? Can you recognize that photograph?
Yes, I do.
Does it fairly and accurately depict the scene?
Yes, it does.
They would move into evidence State's Exhibit CB.
No objection, Your Honor.
Be received in evidence as states number.
May I publish?
You may publish.
All right. Again, this is getting us a little bit farther in. Can you, for orientation, just put a line around the area of concern as we're now approaching it?
That's right, around there.
Now, was this photograph, do you recall, taken with flash?
Yes, it was.
Right. Now, obviously this photograph is assisted with flash. Does it fairly and accurately depict the difficulty in seeing items in that area, or is it better because of the flash?
The entire area was heavily overgrown, as you can see. It was dark and raining. The flash didn't really help that much. It was a good camera. Having looked back on it, I think some of the pictures were better than what I was able to see at the scene with my glasses getting water drops on them.
Okay. Again, because it was still raining the whole time you were there.
Indeed, yes, and cold.
Your Honor, this might be a good time for us to take our lunch break before we get into anything more.
All right, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the time is now 1 minute before the hour of noon. I'm going to ask that you not discuss this case among yourselves, and please remember all of my other previous admonitions. We will be in recess until 1:30. Any additional instructions on behalf of the state or the defense?